I'm going to show you now a short animation featuring the model that I textured using the techniques shown in this video, and of course modelled using the techniques shown in the two previous videos. And I think you'll agree with me that it's quite realistic, so let's have a look. And I'm going to show you how to put the textures on a model like this and how to create an animated texture, which is what the big donut on the front uses for a drive. I'm not going to go into compositing and using Filmic Blender or any of these things, because that'll be the topic of a later video, and so let's get on and I'll show you how to draw some textures. The first one I'm going to do is for the outer skin. Now I've drawn this by hand as you can see with the shaky bits, and brought it in, sized it to 1000 by 1000, and I'm now going to just trace over it to clean it up a bit, but I'm going to do some other stuff as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is to create a new layer. Bang, everything's disappeared, but not all is lost. So if I go to the layers dialog, I can make it translucent. That's exactly what I'm going to do, so that I can trace over the top of what's underneath. Now I'm only going to trace one of these hexagons, and you'll see why shortly. So the first thing I'm going to do, double click on the brush, and what comes up is a selection of brushes, and I don't want this anything like that big, something like 4 pixels wide will do fine, and I'm just simply going to trace. And the way that you trace is by selecting one of the points, clicking on over one of the points there, I hit shift, and that lets me draw a perfectly straight line. 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 And a perfectly straight line. And that's one hexagon. You might think it's done, but it's not. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill these hexagons with lots of smaller hexagons. And the way I'm going to do that is by copying this one, but I need to make this one correct first. And what do I mean by correct? What I mean is I want it to represent what it actually represents, which means I need an inner line that's white, because I'm also going to use it for bump mapping, and the interior needs to be a grey. So let's do that. I'm going to select, whoops, going to select by colour, going to select black, like that. Go to our selection, I'm going to grow it, and I'm going to grow it by 8 pixels. I can get it to do 8, yeah. You can see that's grown it by 8. Now I'm going to reverse that selection by hitting invert, and now this inside here is drawable on. So let's go and find a sort of grey that we want. We want a bluey grey, I think. Something perhaps like, it wants to be a fairly light grey. Something perhaps like that. Then we'll go to the flood fill tool, and there we've got our actual flood filled area. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to fill the inside of it with lots of copies of this actual hexagon here, and there's no easy way to do this unfortunately in GIMP. It's not Photoshop. There are some limitations. So I'm going to go to the free select tool. I'm going to zoom in, like this, and I'm going to select my shape like this, hoping that I do a reasonably good job of it. Copy. And then I'm going to go to brushes, and GIMP lets you select your current copied selection as a tool, as an actual brush. So I'm going to take it up to the sort of size I think I want. That's far too big. A little bit smaller than that perhaps. I'm going to start in the middle. I'm going to carry on tiling like this. And there we go. That's that finished. If you're wondering how I managed to get it only to shade in the draw in the light grey areas, what I did was a colour select on the light grey, which then it makes it ignore everything else. So that's that little bit done. Now what I want to do is introduce a bit of variation, or in some cases a lot of variation. For example, I'm actually going to shade that middle section, the very middle tile, differently from all the rest. In fact, very differently from all the rest. I'm going to do that using the fill tool. It's not different enough, curse it. Like that, and that will make this tile look larger, look higher than all the rest, as well as changing its colour shade, because I'm going to use this as a bump map as well. Now what I want to do is I want to find some options that are in between there. I'm going to shade some of the other. No, that's too light. Undo. I'm going to shade some of the other tiles with somewhat different colours as well, which will vary their heights, as well as introducing some colour differentiation. I'm just doing this at random. as you can see. Except I'm going to make all of those the slightly darker colour. So there we go. And at this point you can do whatever else you like. I mean, maybe you want to add some circular fixings. I can do that. I'm going to do that with this. Not that I think the aliens necessarily need fixings, but hey, there you are. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the paintbrush tool again. This time I'm going to use the solid circular brush. I'm going to take the size right the way down to maybe 6 pixels, which is like that. Oops, I wanted black really. Let's redo that. And you can have loads of fun doing whatever you want with these textures. And I'm going to swap that to white. I need to make sure it is white. I'm going to drop the pixel size again to 2 pixels. Put a little dot in the middle of each of these. And you can do anything you like, because obviously it's an alien ship. Could be a dragon skin pattern, could be almost anything. Who knows what these sneaky aliens have got in their box of tricks. So now I'm going to cut out our hexagon again. Then I'm going to use it as a brush again, but this time I'm going to size the brush so it's the same size. It's a 1-to-1 between this hexagon I've drawn. I might actually do something else first for fun, just to add a bit more complexity. I'm going to put one of these in the middle of that hexagon there. And that will be the first thing I do, so I'm going to go into paint again, select what I've got, increase the size to wherever we need to be. Got to hit copy, edit, Copy. That's better. And then we've got one that's kind of a very pixelated copy of what we got. Now, next thing to do, I'll go back to view. I'm going to fit my 1000 by 1000 image in the window. You can see it. I'm going to resize my brush so that it's the same size. Nearly there. A bit more. Must be a bit more. And I'm going to tile my picture exactly the same way as I made the other one. So that's, need to make sure I've got nothing selected. I'm just going to follow my hand-drawn guidelines to tile up my alien ship like that. And now we've got a more variegated pattern. It doesn't look like I've taken the same pattern and copied it around. It's different. So that's our first texture complete, and this one we can export as a JPEG because there's no transparency in it. That helps because it makes the file sizes much smaller. Export, bang. And that's that one done. Now I want to show you another one that I've done. And here's another one that I've done, and this also is around about 1000 by 1000. It's not quite, but and these are alien text and numbers. This is the ship name. Don't ask me to pronounce it because I don't know alien writing. These are the numbers. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and they will go on the spinning modules, which aren't spinning at the moment but will be, and this will go on the front and the rear of the ship. And really that's all there is to creating textures. That first one was obviously a tileable texture, this one isn't, and you'll see I've put a bit of roughness in those because they'll be at the front and the rear. They'll see more micrometeorite impacts than something like this that's on the side, which will stay looking relatively new. So that's all about creating textures, and that's really all there is to it. It's just a picture, it's an image that you paste on top of your 3D model to make. Right, so let's do some texturing. I've moved one of the drums, and I'm choosing the drum because it's the most complicated thing to do, onto a separate layer so that we can see just the drum. And this is the easiest way to work with anything, and then I'll move it back. Now what I've done as a first step, because it's pretty boring to watch, is I've created just some shells of materials, hull, metal, glass, although the glass and the metal I've actually had a look at. I mean, basically what I've done is I've created this glass material, which I've shown as green in the viewport here, and it is slightly green, and it is just purely a glass material. If I go to the compositing view, you can see all it is glass. That's it, just the standard arrangement. And I'm going to show you how you add materials to different places now very quickly by deselecting my glass material and then redoing it. So if I get rid of this glass material bing, all gone. Now the way that you select different materials is that you go into edit mode and you choose just the places where you want that material, and face select is usually the easiest one to use. So I want glass there. Let's say that I want glass there as well, which I didn't have before. Shift and right click, so I've got that selected as well. Shift and right click, and then I'm going to add a new material. There. It is really a new material. I'm going to call it glass blue, and in the viewport we'll make it a lovely sort of light baby blue colour, and instead of diffuse in there we just put glass. We're going to accept all the defaults, and I'm going to shade that towards the blue. Now, having done that, we've got a material, we need to assign it to these selected places. So all you do is hit assign. And there you go, you can see those places are in fact glass. And if we go back to our object mode, you see they're glass. If I go into rendered view, there. Now, the next thing I want to do, behind my windows, I'd like something to be visible. So, let's go back into solid view again. And I'm going to import some pictures. So, I'm going to import images as planes, and we want, I've got two that I'm going to use, one for each window, large window. I'm not going to bother with the small one. Import images as planes, change our X to 90, which stands it up on end, and you can see it's huge at the moment. It's also a long way away. Still a long way away. That's more like it. And this is going to wind up in the middle of our drum, about there, say. I'm going to scale it down until it disappears inside. S for scale. It's disappeared inside. I'm going to go to as near as I can to a head-on view. I'm going to centre it in the window, check to make sure it's still not visible, which it's not. Then I'm going to go to its material tab, and instead of diffuse I'm going to make it emit. I'm going to give it an emission of about 2, and then we're going to go into rendered view again. Now we can see the image. You can see it quite realistically shifts about, and you can use whatever image you like, obviously. So that's that one, and there you go. So now you've got things inside your spacecraft. I'm going to go back to wireframe. So what I want to do is I want to select that one. I want to select shift and right click the other one. Then I want to select the actual main body of the thing, and then we want to join them. So now they're all one object with different materials. Right, so now that's all done, let's go and do some actual texturing. The first thing I need to do is I'll need to unwrap this, and I'm going to have to make two texture maps, because what I want to do is I want to put a transfer on here which is the number of the actual module, and I'm going to put a different number on each one of these, which is quite easy, and they're going to be just underneath this window in here. So first thing to do is, if we go up here, we can click on UV editing, and that opens a UV editor window. Now I'm going to scroll along. You can do this with your mouse wheel. And oh, I'm in render there, that's no good. We want 3D view. And we're selected, so I'm going into edit mode. There you are. And just make sure you've got all connected. You can hit A twice. The next thing we're going to do is unwrap Smart UV Project, and just accept the defaults. You can see these are all the faces that we're going to texture. Now if I bring in our image, which is that hex tiled one that I made the last time, you remember it? These hexagons are quite big. Now what I want to happen, this is actually a tileable texture that I've made, so what I want to happen is I want these to be much smaller. I want these so that quite a few of them will actually fit on one of these faces, so that as you get closer you don't see these individual hexagons until you're quite close up. And the way to do that is I'm simply going to zoom out. I'm going to select all by pressing the A key. I'm going to scale it. I'm going to zoom out a bit more until I see that, you know, the size of the tiles looks right for this, and something like that, because that texture will repeat over the entire area, and that is Blender's default behaviour, so no problems there. So that's our first UV map, and as you can see it's created, it's called it UV map. I don't want to call it UV map, I'm going to call it tiled, because we're going to need to know in a minute which ones of these are actually what we need. Now if I bring in my number, and it's the bottom one that we're doing, so I'm actually going to need to open a different one in 4, and if I bring that in you can see that's where it is. And now I only want these 3 tiles here, but I need to get all this out of the way. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to select those 3 tiles by hitting shift like that, and you can see that one of those tiles has come out over here. Well, we'll fix that in a minute, but for the moment what I want to do is select those, and then I'm going to select again. I'm going to invert that selection. So I'm now going to come back over to the editor window, hit A, So those tiles are now no longer selected, as you can see. And oh, I left out a step. What did I not do? I should have clicked plus down here to add a new UV map. Which is naughty of me. Never mind. And I'm going to call that number. And Blender will have copied this across to the new UV map, that is its default. So I can play with this now, so long as that number is selected and highlighted in blue. So I can hit S for scale. I'm going to drop the scale right down. Then I'll hit G for grab. I'm going to move it well out of the way. So now we can play with our individual pieces, and we need to find out which piece is which and which way round they are. So the easy way to do that is simply to select one of those pieces, and you can see that that piece is that one, that piece is that one, that piece is that one. So I need to select this piece, which I can do with box select, and I want to show those. Try and do like that. By right clicking on the image, it just brings them up. And I'm going to make a guess. Where do I think which way around do I think that came from? And I think it came that way around, so I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. I'm going to grab it. Now I've already forgotten which way around these pieces went, excuse me. So that's the piece that we've got at the moment. It's on the right hand side. Okay, so it needs to fit to the left hand side of these two. So if I shift, select these two. So I just want to zoom in. Grab it and put it over the top of that. And it needs to be scaled slightly in the Y. S, Y. And that looks to be about it. Now what I want to do is I want to box all of these. Grab and move. And I'm not sure which way around this is going to have to come out. I mean, we're going to have to play with this in a minute to check which way around it actually comes out. As soon as I've got the material sorted out, I'll be able to see. So that's good enough for me, and we will go back to looking at the material. So if I change this to solid mode, whoops, get it right, solid mode, and go back to object mode, make sure we're selected, go to materials, we're on the hull. Brilliant, that's where we want to be, and we're going into compositing, and compositing is showing me my material, which at the moment is just a diffuse white shader, and this is going to be very different very soon. Now, the first thing I want to say is that I'm not actually going to use the colours from that hex texture. It's purely going to be used for bumping. So the displacement is down here, so it makes sense that I stick all the anything to do with bump mapping down here. So I'm going to add in, and the first thing I need to add, working from left to right logically, is our input, which is our UV map, and this is needed because we have two UV maps. If we just had one, we wouldn't need to bother with this stage. I'm going to add in my image texture. No, hang on, I need a texture mapping node first. And what this will do is it will make sure, no, I'm doing bump mapping onto, I don't need that. Get rid of that, that comes for later. So, add an image texture. Sorry about that, ladies and gents. That goes into there. I'm going to open, and the image texture I'm going to use is that hex tiled one. And the colour is going to be used for bumping, so what I've got to do is I want to add a bump map node, which is there. And the colour is going to the height, and I know from experience that this thing's going to be far too strong for us on this project, so I'm also going to add a maths node. Set to multiply, and that's going to go into displacement, and I'm going to set this at 0.1. And I'm going to have to play with that value in a minute to get it right. Now we need to put in the map name, which in this case is tiled, because this is for our tiles. And if I now re-render this, so far so good. And the thing is, remember we put no material on this yet, other than that white. And we want to make it rendered view. Right, so let's just get around to where we want to be so we can see that number coming in, which is about here. Now we want to apply the number over the top of it, and before I do that I want to change the colour of this diffuse. I'm going to take it very dark, bring it up, and the reason I'm doing that is I want to add in a glossy shader, and we'll add in a mix shader to mix the gloss on the other one, add in a glossy shader. And now if we re-render, we should see something a bit different. Good. Now, are we too deep? I think we probably are. So I'm sure when I played about with this before, I had this set to 0.1. And of course the background isn't going to help because the background's grey, so where it's glossy it's going to be reflecting grey, so I'm going to leave that for the moment. Might have to tinker about with it later. Right, so let's add our transfer, and we need a UV map input again. This time though we're using the number. This time we do need a mapping node, which looks big and horribly complex, but for our purposes here all we've got to do is click two things. I'm going to connect that into our vector. Make sure you clicked min and max. That's the only reason we're adding this node, otherwise it will tile that sticker all over the object. And we're going to add image texture, and the image we're going to have is N4 for number 4. And now I'm going to change the way that this diffuse shader is getting its colour, and I'm going to add in where is it, a colour? No. It's from input, I think. RGB node. That's the one. I'm going to set that about where it was, which was somewhere down here. Very dark, almost black colour. That goes in there. And this is going to get some of its colour from our friend here, and some of its colour from here. And the way we do that is by adding in the mix RGB node, and we're going to mix that colour with that colour, take the output and put it up there. And you can see already we've got a pale you see what happens, that one we added was the other way around, it was rotating 180 degrees, and we'll fix that in a minute. The first thing I want to do is to get this mix right, and I think I can do that by simply taking the alpha to the factor there, and there we go. I must learn to turn that off. Right, so that looks fine. We could make this brighter if we wanted to. I don't think we need to. I think the kind of faded look would be good, especially when it's dark. because don't forget this is all grey at the moment. If I change the world background to what it will be, which is black, oops, well, there's no light in there, that won't help either. So yeah, we'll go back to UV, we'll go back to the UV map, and we want our number map, and this one that we added on we need to turn around. I'm not going to bother about loading in the other picture, there's no need to do it. Select linked, that will get all of that face, and we want R18, turn it round, and if I go into rendered mode here, you can see that we've now got our image, but our image is sideways. I want it kind of top up towards the window, so I am going to have to bring in that other image to have a look at it. So we need to rotate these, so if I box select all of them, let's see which way we need to rotate them. Minus 90, so that's R minus 90. Oops, what went wrong there? Control Z, escape, so that's R minus 90, hit enter. Oh, I hit a wrong key, that's what went wrong. There we have it, and if I hit move, like G for grab, then I can position it how I want it. And if I want it a bit narrower, I can scale these in the X direction, which will make the whole thing a bit fatter, which is more like what I want. G for grab, re-centralise it again, and there we are, and that's exactly what I want. So now if I go back to our default, go back to edit mode, object mode, make sure that's selected, M, move it back to the first layer again, here we are, we've got some light on it. I've already set up the camera. See, that's what it looks like with a grey background, because don't forget this is material we got on here is reflective, so it's reflecting all of the grey. But if I go and put the world into a black background, and render it again, you can see the effect. So now all I need to do is repeat that 4 times for the other tubes, and also to put some texturing on these other parts here and on here, now on these beams. Now you might want to know something about this material I used here. As you can probably see, it gives a brushed metal effect. It's very simple. It's called the anisotropic shader, very easy to use. So if I go back to, if I hide the render view, go back to materials, you can see I've got metal there. And metal is brushed in my world, so that's what it is. So let's go back into our wonderful compositing view, and we can see that all it is an anisotropic shader with the anisotropy set to 0.9 and just straight into the surface, and that gives you a wonderful brushed metal effect. And you can tint that if you want to by putting in a colour, and I'll do that just quickly here. What we're going to do, we're going to make it I'm not going to make it a diffuse. Yeah, I will actually. I haven't tried this one before. So I can add in a mix shader. I can give it a subtly pink colour if I wanted to, or how about a coppery colour? And I can change the factor of that. So now if I render my image, you can see you've got a kind of coppery coloured metal instead of what you had before, which was quite aluminium looking. Like so. Quite pretty. But I need to go back to this because it's not dark enough, it's reflecting too much. So I'm going to go back to the hull colour, the whole material rather, and up here I've got this mixer which is mixing the gloss, and it's just too much gloss. No, wrong way. I want to take the roughness down, which makes the highlights smaller. And that looks a lot better. Make the colour blacker. That'll make it look better again, I think. And of course it makes our numbers stand out, so that's even better. So I think that's the whole material about done. I might add a grunge texture to give it some realism. I don't know, I'll try it and see what it looks like. But the next thing I wanted to go over with you is texture animation, because I'm going to use an animated texture for our drive on this machine. So we're going to go back into our default view, and this torus here is the drive torus, and I think I've already got one, maybe. No, I don't. So new material, and it's going to be a mix of glass and emission shaders. I like giving my glass a slightly green tint, I don't know why, I always think it looks better. So I need to move the camera and the light up. So that it actually looks at that, otherwise we won't see what's going on at any time. And I'm going to go straight. What have I done there? Oh yeah, I want to make sure that's selected. I'm going to rename that as drive. Go back into compositing, and texture animation is a fun thing. Oh, something else I need to do before I do that. Default. I'm going to add an empty. There's a lot of ways you can do about this. You can use any object, any other object, to animate your textures. I'm just going to put an empty around somewhere so that whenever the ship moves, the texture animates. That's the easiest way to do it. So, object mode, yeah, add an empty. Now an empty never gets rendered, you might like to know. And there it is, it's just a crosshair, as you can see. Now as this crosshair gets moved, our texture on our donut here will actually move with it. Excuse me 1 second. And we're back in the room. I just had a coughing fit, I thought I'd spare you that. Right, so we've got everything selected. Make sure our donut's selected, we call drive. We're going to go into having added our empty, which will just be called empty. We're going to go into compositing again, and we can see here we've got our glass shader, which is fine, but we also need a mix shader. So I'm going to add in a mix shader. All these do is mix two different shaders together. If you didn't know, I strongly suspect you do. I'm going to add in an emission shader and give it a reasonably high value of emission, something like, I don't know, 7, something like that, maybe. I'm going to add in a texture coordinate input because we're animating it. Now I'm going to add in, and this might surprise you, I'm not adding in an image texture. I'm going to add in this thing here called a magic texture, which is a multicoloured texture. Wonderful thing it is. You can do all sorts of weird things with it. And we're going to use, where is it, object, that one there, and that's going to be our vector, and the object we're going to use is going to be our empty. Don't know if you can see that, but there you go. And the colour from there is going to our emission colour. If I render image at the moment, oh, I thought I'd move the camera, maybe not. Or maybe the camera's got some animation selected on it. Okay, let's do this a different way. Whoa, it's a bit bright, isn't it? So that is our magic texture applied on here and given some emission value. It's our wonderful light. So what we need to do now is play with the scale until we get what we want, and the distortion. Something like that, I think. And the depth, which is how many different colour bands you've got. 1 of each colour, 2 of each colour, and so on. 3 is about optimum. For me anyway, that's what I like. And now because we selected the empty as our object, we can, I'm cunning about it, if I go back into default, there's our empty. Let's just zoom in on him a bit, move to rendered mode. Now if I move that empty, you can see the texture changes, and if you leave the empty where it is, the texture will change if the ship moves. It doesn't matter which direction you go in. Doesn't matter which direction you go in, the texture will change. And that's how you animate a texture, and you can use that for all sorts of things. You can use it for jet engine exhausts, for example. As the plane moves, the jet engine exhaust wavers and changes. Rocket exhausts, all sorts of things like that you can use it for. But I'm not satisfied with that. I'm going to add something else in. I'm going to try to anyway. I haven't tried this before, but it's what I wanted to do. And I want to add in another texture as well. And in order to do that, I need to reselect our wonderful donut. I'm going to add in a colour mix node. I'm going to add in yet another texture. This time it's going to be a Voronoi texture which produces cell-shaped patterns. And the vector is still going to be our object, so it's the same. Cells, and what sort of scale have I got? So do I want to use it like that, or do I want to use it in a different way, I wonder? Because that is totally the Voronoi texture that you're seeing there. And see, some of these things take some playing around with sometimes. So I just wanted something more complicated than the magic texture pattern. I think that would do. Certainly do for the moment. I may come up with something else before I do the final render. That's fine. I think that scale is a bit too big. Whoops. A bit too small. I think we want large areas. And you can play around this to your heart's content. I mean, that scale there, for example, that would have a totally different effect. It's going to be something like that. And I'm wondering if I might be better taking this to the emission strength. Oh, yes, that's a good thing. Gosh, I can get rid of my colour mix now there as well. Colour. That I like. What happens if we go to cells? No. Intensity. And what sort of scale do we want? Oh, that's much better, isn't it? Let's just check that that animates okay. Save my file first, it's about time I did that. To our default view. Select the empty. G for grab. Oh yes, that's very pretty. Yeah, I'll go for that. So that's the texture that I'm going to use for the drive. Right, so that's all the different texturing methods that I'm going to be using, and it's just up to you to play around with what you want to do. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and if you have, please like and subscribe. Thanks very much.